Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD tonight, where we talk about Lyme disease. You create this webinar with your questions, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Sometimes I actually learn some new things by the questions you write, so please write anything you're interested in, and we'll explore it together. I am creating a recording of tonight's webinar so that tomorrow morning, if you happen to miss some of the details about what we talk about, you'll be able to listen to that recording. You'll get an email from me somewhere around 6:30 a.m. in the morning, Seattle time. And again, that's a 3-hour time difference from the East Coast here in the United States. So look for that email to come out. If you happen to miss that email, you can find it in 3 other ways. One is, I post it each time on the supplement store at Marty Ross MD Supplements, which is at treatlyme.com. You can find it at the bottom of the homepage. I also post it on Facebook, and that's facebook.com/treatlyme. And then finally, you can find a copy of the recording of the video posted on the Treatlyme book website at treatlyme.net on the webinar's recording page. Okay, so there's 3 different ways that you can find it. And actually, if you happen to subscribe to me on YouTube, I have a YouTube channel there too that you can find it. So I try to make this stuff as accessible as we possibly can. So just so you know, there's no question that is off bounds. Feel free to ask away. And if you think it's something that might help you, it probably is going to help other people too. So go ahead and ask. So let's go ahead and get started. Hello, Tom. Let's see. Dr. Ross, I have tried taking turmeric on multiple occasions for cytokine control, and it does not sit well with my GI system. Are there any alternatives? I'm currently taking doxycycline, grapefruit seed extract, and Alinea. Thanks. All right. So turmeric, everyone, is the Indian seasoning, and a major component of that actually is curcumin. Tom, it's possible if you're not tolerating turmeric, you might tolerate curcumin. That's one option, right? So Tom's talking about using them to lower a group of inflammatory chemicals that get overproduced in Lyme disease called cytokines, all right? And cytokines are good and bad. Cytokines are made by white blood cells when they see an infection like Lyme, or if they see yeast in your intestines, or if they see mold toxins that are built up in you, your white blood cells are going to make cytokines. Now, in Lyme disease and in mold toxicity illness and in yeast overgrowth, what happens is the immune system doesn't do a good job with those conditions, and it keeps trying harder and harder, and eventually it makes too many cytokines. And too many cytokines give you what we call Lyme symptoms. In fact, Lyme symptoms are really excess cytokine symptoms, okay? And so excess cytokines make it so you can't think, make you fatigued, make you hurt all over, give you sleep disturbances, interfere with how your hormonal systems work. Basically, most of the things we call Lyme symptoms are excess cytokine symptoms. Most of the things we call mold toxicity illness symptoms are excess cytokines. Most of the things we call yeast syndrome symptoms, or too many yeast growing in the intestines, are due to excess cytokines, all right? And then finally, when you start killing Lyme germs, that triggers a cytokine flare, actually. That's called a Herxheimer reaction. So you'll get increased cytokines from that. So what can you do? Well, first of all, you could do curcumin or turmeric, 500 milligrams 3 times a day. I prefer liposomal varieties of that. And my favorite curcumin product is something made by Thorne called Mariva 500 SF, okay? The other thing you can do, though, is quercetin is another chemical that you could use, or an herbal medicine you can use. It actually is a chemical that comes from the skin of colorful fruits and vegetables. And before I started using curcumin and turmeric a number of years ago, it used to be quercetin that I wound up using. So quercetin gets inside the white blood cells and blocks cytokine production, much like curcumin does, all right? But it also has another added advantage in that it can lower histamine levels. So some of you may have something called mast cell activation syndrome, where your allergic system is just overly turned on as a result of having chronic Lyme infection. And quercetin actually can help stabilize the mast cells where histamines are made and limit their production too. So if you're going to use it, though, to lower cytokines, it comes as a 250 milligram pill. And I like to have people take it as 2 pills 3 times a day to lower their cytokines. And then finally, Tom, something else you can do to lower cytokines is work with a very strong antioxidant that lowers those cytokines down. And for that, I like using either a brown seaweed extract called Fiber Boost, 2 pills 2 times a day, or I like using glutathione, liposomal glutathione. Liposomal means it's microscopically wrapped in fat. And I like a product called Trifortify by Research Nutritionals for that. And I usually have people take 5 milliliters 1 time a day. Okay. So those will give you some ideas. Many of you may know, if in terms of supplements, I'll talk in terms of generics and also brands. If you're looking at where you can get those products, I do carry them. I'm offering you the same products or describing the same ones I use with my patients, and they get them at my supplement store, which is Marty Ross MD Supplements. I'll show that to you later. All right. Good luck to you, Tom. Thanks for that question. Oh, let me do a quick screen share. So if you want to see more about this. Well, that's interesting. Looks like my ability to do screen shares is not working tonight. Sorry about that, but that may not work. Well, let me see. Let me try it a different way here. Hold on here, man. There we go. Okay. All right. So this is the Treat Lyme book. And for questions like you just asked, I probably have written an article about it. Okay. So there is a chapter called Herxheimer and Cytokines. And in here, you can find an article that I've written called Control Cytokines, a guide to fix Lyme symptoms in the immune system. Okay. And in here, I review the various supplements I like to use to lower cytokines. All right. And then, interestingly enough, I just posted this article earlier last weekend. I believe it was last week, or March 4th, I guess, is when I posted it. It's an article on medical marijuana, cannabis, and CBD for Lyme. CBD and medical marijuana actually can be useful at lowering cytokines too. So I'll just point that out to you as well too. All right. So let me go back here. All right, there you go, Tom. Good luck to you. Thank you for that question. Hello, Rita. Let's see. What is your best recommendation for anxiety with some panic attacks and often nightmares after being asleep for a few hours? Thanks for what you do. Unfortunately, there's not one good choice here. There's some things you would have to try and see do they work for you, okay? So in prescription medicine, the medicines that control anxiety are the benzodiazepines, and some of those are useful at helping for sleep and would be ones that would stay around long enough to help you so you're not waking up with panic attacks, okay? So one of those that I might consider trying from a prescription medicine standpoint would be a drug called Klonopin, also known as clonazepam. It's an anti-anxiety medicine that does a good job of getting you asleep, but it also happens to stay around for a while. It has a long half-life. It can even be around into the next morning, for instance, and can control anxiety and maybe in you at high enough levels basically that it would keep you asleep and keep the anxiety from coming up. Okay, so that's one thought. You could also consider trying a prescription medicine called trazodone. Trazodone is a medicine that was designed originally as an antidepressant medicine, but it does a good job of keeping people in deep restorative sleep called REM3 and REM4 sleep. Does not have any addictive potentials the way that the clonazepam might. And maybe that would stay around at a dose that would be good enough to keep you asleep. You could do that as a 50 milligram to 100 milligram pill before bedtime, okay? Herbally, what you might try would be something called L-theanine. That's the letter L and then dash theanine. And so that's a component of green tea that is not caffeine. It's just a separate chemical component. And it is converted in the brain into a chemical called GABA. And GABA, there's receptors for GABA. In fact, they're called the GABA benzodiazepine receptor. And remember, I was just talking about Klonopin being a benzodiazepine, all right? So if you give more GABA to a GABA receptor, it can help calm things down, all right? And L-theanine, because it's converted into GABA, is one way to do that. And you would take it as a 100 milligram pill, anywhere from about 200 to 600 milligrams at night, may be a way of managing that as well too. Okay. And then finally, although I've never tried it for this, it might give you some benefit. If you happen to be in a medical marijuana state where you can get marijuana products that are rich in the chemical THC, so medical marijuana, the marijuana plant the bud of the plant is rich in THC. The green parts are rich in CBD, but that THC is good for sleep. It's the psychoactive part of things. And it can help calm anxiety as well, too. Okay. Although in high amounts, sometimes it triggers extreme anxiety, but at lower doses that might get you to sleep, it may stay around long enough to help you with anxiety as well, too. And if you happen to be in one of those states where you can do that, go talk to your medical marijuana store, talk to the bud keepers, and explain what's going on, and they will probably be able to help you find a product that is richer in THC to put you asleep and to help control some of that anxiety. And that might be another way to do it. If you've never used medical marijuana before, good starting dose, if you're going to do edibles, is 5 milligrams. If you've used it before, maybe 10 milligrams. You also can do inhaled versions that happen to take effect a little bit more quickly. The inhaled versions, whether you're using a pen or a live product, usually will start having effect within about a minute or two. Maximum effect will start occurring at about 15 minutes to 30 minutes, okay? Versus if you do edibles, it can take 90 minutes to an hour or so for those to kick in. They get a little bit harder to dose, all right? All right. Take a look at my medical marijuana product article for more information about that, Rita. Good luck to you. Thank you for that question. Hello, Michelle. Let's see. I saw something on your website regarding stevia shortly after the study results for Lyme in vitro came out. Any updates on using this as an antibacterial? So in vitro, everybody means in lab experiments, not in living humans, okay? And so I think as these studies came out maybe about a year and a half or so ago, a researcher by the name of Eva Chapi, that's SAPI, is running one of the more novel Lyme disease research labs in the country out of New Haven, Connecticut. And she's been looking at ways to treat persister forms of Lyme that goes on even after you've been on antibiotics for a while, and things to use to remove biofilms. And she stumbled upon stevia, the plant artificial sweetener called stevia. So stevia has a sweet taste, strong aftertaste, but a sweet taste too. And so her experiments on Petri dishes show that stevia is great at removing biofilm, which is a slime layer that can cover Lyme and block treatment. And it also can help treat what are called persister cells. Okay, so persisters are forms of Lyme that when you've been exposed to antibiotics for a while, slow their metabolism way down. They basically go into hibernation. So you can have persister spirochetes that have gone into hibernation. You can have round bodies or cyst forms, and you can also have biofilm communities that are part of persisters as well too. So her studies showed that stevia did a great job at reducing these persister community and persister forms too. However, there's the however, okay? I've tried using it in my practice, and I just don't find good results. And even though I still have a study up about it, the reality is I just don't, for the majority of people, I have an occasional person that does get some benefit from it, but the majority of people actually do not see benefit from it. And I think what the issue is, and this is true with any laboratory experiments, what happens in the lab does not necessarily mean it happens the same way in a living person, okay? And I suspect what the issue is that the stevia is probably getting broken down to some degree in the intestines well before it can get absorbed in high enough quantities to be able to help within the bloodstream. In other words, it's just not getting absorbed. I think that's what's going on, okay? But I have not been that impressed with stevia in a clinical setting as something that's useful, all right? All right, Michelle, thank you for that question. Hello, Linda. Good evening, Dr. Ross. I have neurologic Lyme, MS, and after long-term treatment, I'm doing quite well. I would like to resume my passion for traveling abroad. What are your thoughts about travel vaccinations for those with chronic Lyme? Can the vaccinations pose a vulnerability and contribute to relapse? I'm not sure what my immune system can handle. Thank you. That's a tricky question. One of the things that I tend to see in my practice that I have the most information about is the flu vaccine. Okay. Now, the flu vaccine gets a little tricky. So, for instance, this year, I know we've had a bad flu season in the country. All right. And so everyone's been promoting getting your flu vaccine. All right. Now, what's interesting to me is part of the reason that we're having such a bad flu season is that the vaccine did not work this year. It only worked 30% of the time. So that's one of the big reasons we're seeing such a problem. And yet they're promoting getting the vaccine done. All right. Now, and regarding the flu vaccine, I'm going to come to your question too. But the flu vaccine, I do get concerned about because that is one vaccine that I see when people have Lyme and they get the flu vaccine, there is a good chance that the Lyme is going to get more active. I see that happen again and again, okay? And so I often advise against the flu vaccine because there's a great risk of decline in your Lyme symptoms while you're on it. And in return, it just tends not to work that well. So in an average year, it only works about 40 to 50%. This year, it even worked worse. It only worked about 30% of the time, okay? So regarding vaccines, most of the information I have about vaccines is about the flu vaccine, all right? Travel vaccines, I just really don't know well enough to know whether people really flare on them or not. What we think happens with the flu vaccine, for instance, is that probably as the immune system is having to deal with the flu vaccine, it causes some relative immune suppression that allows the Lyme germ to take off. I actually do not know if that is what happens in travel vaccines like you're talking about, okay? So I guess what I would do regarding your travel vaccines, they're probably going to want you to get hepatitis A and hepatitis B. I would probably caution against the hepatitis A. And the reason is that most people that get hepatitis A, and everyone that gets hepatitis A, it is never a chronic infection. All right, you're not going to suffer long-term consequences. The biggest problem you're going to get with hepatitis A is that it can give you diarrhea and nausea, for instance. Okay, so that one is a situation that if you got it, you would recover. So I probably would not recommend for that one. In terms of other vaccines, I would just tell you, you'd have to talk to your travel medicine doctor and find the real risk that you're going to get one of these infections depending on where you're traveling in the world. Okay? All right. Sorry, Linda. I don't have much better information than that. Okay. Good luck to you. Hello, Randy. Let's see. I had a bad relapse 6 weeks ago. I've been taking diflucan, nystatin for the last 2.5 weeks. Is a month enough? I'm also on Banderol Cemento and Panella Berber Cryptolepis for Babesia. Is this too much? What do you recommend? Okay. So, Randy, what Randy may be alluding to with her question is one of the points that I raise in the Treat Lyme book and on these webinars is if you've been doing better and then you start to have a relapse, about 80 to 90% of the time, what I see in my clinical practice is that one of the reasons is due to yeast, okay? So what happens is if you have too many yeast living in your intestines, the immune system will see those germs and react by making too many cytokines. All right. Also, those yeast release toxins too. And by treating Lyme, you're already at risk of getting too many yeast because you're on antibiotics. Even if you do good things like take probiotics, take nystatin, for instance, or take herbal yeast killers, there is always the risk you're going to get too many yeast. All right. So again, in my practice, 80 to 90% of the time that I see a relapse or a decline, I think yeast could be there. Okay. Now, if yeast are there, Randy, 2.5 weeks is probably not enough. What I see is it takes about 3 weeks or so of being on 3 to 4 weeks of being on nystatin and diflucan for the turnaround to start. And so to know if your yeast treatment is working, first look at the symptoms that suggested yeast to you. Okay, so in addition to a decline, things that suggest yeast have gotten active are increased sugar cravings, increased intestinal gasiness or bloating, sometimes pimples or acne. The yeast release toxins that interact with your skin and can give you pimples and acne, actually. And in a woman, if you've had vaginal itching, vaginal discharge, you're going to look and see, are those symptoms getting better? And if they are, then at least you're on the right yeast treatment, okay? But if you had those symptoms and you're not getting better after 3 to 4 weeks on a nice diet diflucan, it's possible that the yeast could be resistant to the diflucan. That happens sometimes, okay? In which case you would want to use a different anti-yeast agent, okay? So what I would recommend is if you did have enough symptoms that said yeast, you need to wait a little bit longer to see if this diflucan nystatin is going to work, all right? And if you still continue to have a lot of yeast symptoms after 3 to 4 weeks of being on this, you're going to need to use a different anti-yeast treatment. And let me show you where you can go to get some ideas about that. So let me do a quick screen share here. In my chapter on yeast. Okay, so here's an article called Steps to Fix a Lyme Treatment Crash, where I talk about yeast being one of the big things to think about. But in the yeast treatment, I give you a number of ways to think about killing yeast. Take a look at this article called Kills Yeast, A Brief Guide, in which I talk about options to use if diflucan nystatin is not working. There's a number of things that I will consider trying, okay? All right, let me go back here again. That answers what you were looking for. All right. Hello, what are your thoughts on ochratoxin A? I just got lab results from the Great Plains lab, and this toxin is very high. Is there any treatment besides cholestyramine? So ochratoxin is a mold toxin, all right? And there's a variety of mold toxins. The lab that I tend to use is Real Time Labs, for instance, out of Texas. They test for 4 families. One is ochratoxin, one is gliatoxin, one is aflatoxin, and another one's trichosethene. Trichosethene would be black mold toxin, for instance. Your ochratoxins and your aflatoxins tend to come from a mold that grows in wet buildings called Aspergillus. That's where they tend to come from. I will also tell you, if you start reading about ochratoxin and aflatoxin, especially ochratoxin, sometimes it's something that can be on grains as well too, okay? But if you have very elevated ochratoxin levels, it is possible that they're contributing to your health problems and that you acquired them somewhere in your life, either from the current home you live in or from where you've lived or worked before, okay? So step 1, if you've got elevated ochratoxin, is to get some kind of a study done of your home environment and maybe even your work environment to see if you've got exposures in your home. And one way to do that is to go to a company online called Mycometrix. It's mycometrix.com and order up one of their home testing kits called an ERMI kit and see whether that shows if you have elevated levels, okay? Another way to do it would be to get a local expert that could come in and do the studies in your home for you. Here in Seattle, for instance, I have an expert that I wind up using to do that. All right. So you want to make sure you're not having ongoing exposures where you are. All right. Now, based upon the work of Dr. Richie Shoemaker, who was one of the pioneers in the mold toxicity illness area, Dr. Shoemaker has been able to show that around 25% of us, when we get exposed to mold toxins in our environment, are not able to remove them once we breathe them in or drink them in. All right. What happens in 75% of us is our immune system will see those toxins and tag them for removal. Once they've been tagged, the immune system breaks them down. But if they don't get tagged for removal, they go to the liver as a fat-based toxin. The liver is supposed to transform fat toxins into water toxins and then move them out into the intestines. They're supposed to get mixed in our poop and we poop them out. But with mold toxins, if they go to the liver is not able to handle them correctly, and they come out still as a fat toxin, and then they get out in the intestines and they get reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. So you just got this endless swimming pool of toxins, okay? So what you want to do is bind them in the intestines to pull them out. And there are a variety of binders that you can use, okay? And so it is possible that cholestyramine could work on ochratoxin, but there are other binders too. And this one, I'm just blanking here. I think would be another good binder for ochratoxin would be activated charcoal. However, we're going to look at this together. I'm going to show you the article that you can look at, okay? I always wind up having to look this one up. I use references in my practice for things that I don't always remember off the top of my head. You would think I would remember this, but I don't always, all right? So I'm going to do a quick screen share here. There is an article I have in which I wrote down what are the best binders given what your toxin fingerprint looks like, okay? And so it's in this article called Mold Toxin Illness and Lyme Disease. All right, and I talk more about it. Okay, so anyhow, in terms of the binders, I'm reading here, right here in my toxin binder section, okay? So here's where I say ochratoxins are bound best by cholestyramine and activated charcoal. How do you like that? I said both of those, okay? So anyhow, look here, depending on what your pattern is, this will tell you, this article right here will show you which is the best binder to use, okay? So let me go back to your question here. Yes, it could be a problem. I just got, let's see, is there any treatment besides cholestyramine? Answer, yeah, make sure your environment is cleaned, okay? And then in terms of other things you could use, you could try activated charcoal. Activated charcoal you would get as a 500 milligram pill. I usually have people start at 1, and after a few days, if it has not flared you up in any way, then you might go to 2 pills 1 time a day. And then in about 3 more days, if you're not flared up, you might go to 2 pills in the morning, 1 pill at nighttime. And in 2 to 3 more days, if you're not flared up, you might go to 2 pills in the morning, 2 pills at nighttime. All right. Now, the thing about pulling out mold toxins with your binders, you got to be careful not to go too fast. The act of pulling those toxins out can trigger cytokines. Okay, you can get a huge cytokine flare that can make you a lot worse and knock you down, and you could take a long time coming back out of that. All right, so you got to go low and slow. The other thing you want to do in terms of your binders, whether you use cholestyramine or activated charcoal, like I just talked about, is you want to control cytokines. And we talked earlier, the first question was about cytokines, but at a minimum, I would try to do the liposomal curcumin product, 500 milligram pills, and you might start at 2 pills 3 times a day. Be very aggressive about blocking those cytokines down, okay? Then the other thing that can be helpful is to be on glutathione. And we talked about that earlier. Liposomal variety, I like a research nutritional product called Trifortify, but you might start at 5 milliliters, which is a teaspoon, 2 times a day of that. Okay, so you got to block your cytokines down, and then you got to go low and slow. Okay, that would be the big thing for you. Okay, and then make sure you've got your home environment cleaned out as well too. All right. All right. Good luck to you, June. Thank you for that question. Hello, Jennifer. Let's see. I'm having terrible blood sugar problems. Is this normal? Shakes, anxiety, heart rate fast right after eating. Okay. So, Jennifer, bear with me here a minute. So, Jennifer, I'm not sure if I'm going to have a good result. I guess there's a lot of questions I need to ask you a little bit more. But one thing that you might want to try with this is it sounds like it's a hypoglycemia problem even after even after having sugar. The one thing you want to do is balance out your sugar so that you're not getting huge sugar surges. To do that, you need to include, when you eat, make sure you're having protein. Protein could be in the form of meats and fish. It could be in terms of soy nuts, for instance. You could do something like that. Tofu, cheeses, nuts, nut butters. Just make sure you're having a lot of protein at the time you eat. See if that will balance it out. If that doesn't balance it out, sometimes these kind of problems can be related to yeast. Actually, can give you some sugar imbalance problems like this too. So consider if you have yeast. And then finally, you might also consider doing some adrenal supports like an ashwagandha, for instance. Ashwagandha is an Ayurvedic herb that helps your adrenals work better. And I would do 400 milligram pill, 2 pills in the morning and 2 pills between 1 and 2 to help with that. Okay? All right. Thank you for that question. And good luck. Hello, Maria. Let's see. Hi, doctor. Is rhodiola or ashwagandha a better adaptogen? Do you have to have night sweats to have babesia? Okay. So let me start with the second part of that question. So in terms of babesia, there are a number of symptoms that you can have that can suggest babesia, and not one of them gives you the diagnosis necessarily. Okay, so you don't have to have all of them. All right, so one of the big classic ones is night sweats, but usually it's more drenching night sweats, not kind of clammy night sweats. Clammy, periodic, low-grade night sweats sometimes can be due to too many cytokines, okay? I mean, think about when you get the flu, for instance. You're having sweats, it's cytokines that get triggered even when you have the flu, and that gives you the sweats. But drenching night sweats occurring on most evenings can be a sign of babesia. Also, panic attacks is another symptom. Sometimes people with babesia will have racing and skipping of their heart. Sometimes they'll have frequent periods where they feel like they're going to pass out. Having headaches in the front of the head can be one of those symptoms. Having frequent deja vu symptoms can sometimes make you think of babesia. And then finally, just severe fatigue can be a symptom that we see with babesia. Also, sometimes people with babesia get these little red blood blisters under their skin, little red dots that look like the color of blood. That can be sometimes caused by babesia as well, too. Can you have babesia with night sweats? Yeah. Sometimes we'll diagnose it based on the other symptoms that are there, especially if we've got somebody that's not getting better, okay, with their energy as well, too. It makes me think of that, all right? In terms of adaptogens, there's a number of things you can do. So adaptogens, everyone, are herbs that you can use that help the body deal with stress. They tend to work by supporting the adrenal glands, okay? And in the case of ashwagandha, they support the adrenals and the thyroid, according to what animal studies tell us, all right? Now, one thing you got to be careful about with your adaptogens is they sometimes can be energetically too hot, all right? So y'all know about yin and yang, right? So yang is boisterous energy, and yin is more supportive, nurturing kind of energy. So one thing that is in short supply, often in people that have Lyme, is yin energy. That's why you're so fatigued. Your body is short on yin energy, all right? So what happens between yin and yang is they balance each other out. So you need enough yin energy to hold your yang energy down, okay? So part of the problem with adaptogens like cordyceps, or like rhodiola, or like Siberian ginseng, or adrenal glandulars, okay, adrenal glandulars, right? They tend to be too yang. And with you having limited yin when you have Lyme, to hold that down, they can be too stimulating. They can jack you up too much in a false way, actually. In some ways, they can drain you, okay? So my preference in terms of an adaptogen in Lyme is actually ashwagandha, because it tends to come in right in between, in terms of yin and yang. It comes in right in between those. It's not too yin, it's not too yang, basically, all right? So my preference is to use ashwagandha as a 400 milligram pill, 2 pills in the morning generally, and 2 pills between 1 and 2. In terms of if I'm going to use it as an adaptogen to help with energy, help the adrenals work better, help the thyroid gland work better too. Okay? All right. Thanks for that question, Maria. I hope that gives you some insights. Hello, Jan. Hold on here just a minute. All right, let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. My PCP prescribed desmopressin as my ADH hormone was very low. My heart doctor says it makes my sodium low. My sodium and chloride were both low before taking desmopressin. It helps me out not urinate at night so I can sleep. I am hypothyroid using 150 milligrams of Armour Thyroid. And I think there's a second part to your question, Jan. Let me see if I can find it here. Jan, I don't see the last part of it there, unfortunately. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. I don't see where the second part of your question is. All right. I did see one thing when I was perusing the questions, though, that I want to take a look at here. I think I did. Here we go. This is from Randy. I didn't answer the second part of the question. I talked about the diflucan nystatin. You want to know, is it too much to be taking those along with Banderol, Cemento, Panella, Berber, Cryptolepis? No, I don't think so. I will do that often. Is mix my antifungals with herbs like this. I don't think in and of itself it's too much. All right. All right, let's go here. Hello, Oscar. Let's see. 2013 IGeneX positive for Lyme and Bartonella. Recently retested due to relapse. Results Lyme IgG negative, IgM positive, Bartonella IgG positive, IgM negative. I was told I am positive for both Lyme and Bartonella. Any opinion on the results? And also, what is the most effective cyst buster for Lyme? All right. So, first of all, there really is not any decent testing we can do that says that Lyme is or is not active. Okay. Actually, there's not a decent test we can do that is always accurate. Let me put it that way. All right. So, in terms of your Lyme antibody results, so when we treat somebody with Lyme, there's a good chance that when we're done treating, the germ is never gone, okay? And that germ persists in you. So the best we're doing with antibiotics is we're knocking the germ down, but that doesn't mean that when you're done, it's out of you. So it's very possible that you're going to continue to have ongoing antibody reaction, all right? Now, whenever we develop antibodies, they fall into two families. There's a family called IgM and IgG antibodies. IgMs are what we develop in an acute infection, and IgGs are supposed to replace them generally by around 3 months. IgMs are supposed to go away, and then IgGs take over, okay? Once you develop IgGs, they are the memory of the immune system, and they won't go away even after a germ is out of you, okay? So, on your Bartonella IgG being positive, and if you had Bartonella before, still having an IgG positive is what I would expect, even if the germ is out of you, okay? Bartonella we can knock out, okay? So that IgG being positive doesn't tell me whether it's active or not, or whether you had a Bartonella relapse. I can't tell because IgGs could have been positive from the first time you got treated, okay? In terms of that IgM, as I said, generally IgM means an acute infection. However, in Lyme, about 80% of the time that somebody has had Lyme in them for a year or more, the IgMs do not go away. Those people never convert to making IgGs. And it's not clear why. We have a theory why it happens. And that theory is that is based on something we know to happen, and that is that what a germ covering is a double layer of fat into which proteins are stuck, okay? And in Lyme, we know from science that that these proteins have the ability to bury themselves in the fat and pop them back out at random. Okay, so what happens is what the germ looks like is always changing. It's always changing its appearance because these proteins are moving around. So we know that happens. Okay, what we hypothesize then happens is that the immune system is always seeing that Lyme germ looking a little bit different because it keeps changing what it looks like. And the immune system gets tricked into thinking it's constantly seeing a new infection, and it keeps making the new infection antibodies, which are the IgMs, all right? So the fact that your IgMs are positive, all that tells me is you've got germ in you. But even when we get done treating Lyme, most of the time, probably the germ is still in you, unless you got your antibiotics in the first month of infection, or maybe the first couple months of infection. Probably even when we get done treating, that germ is still going to be in you. We just don't have a good way of wiping it out. So the fact that your IgM is positive says, well, yeah, you've got Lyme in you. It doesn't tell me whether what you're perceiving as a relapse is really due to Lyme or not. So we can't tell. Okay. Now, there's another test that some of my colleagues are starting to do regularly, and I do periodically, but I'm just not that encouraged by it. And that is to do a test called an ELISpot. And what an ELISpot test does is it looks to see if your white blood cells, called T cells, have been treating Lyme or a germ within the last 2 months. All right. And what it is we take your T white blood cells, which are supposed to attack Lyme germs, we pull them out of your blood, and then we expose them to Lyme proteins, and we see if they react by releasing chemicals called cytokines. And if they do release cytokines, that means they've been going after Lyme probably within the last 2 months, okay? There's a problem, though, and that test can miss Lyme if it's in you 15% of the time, if it's done by a lab in Germany called Armin Labs, okay? Recently, IGeneX developed their own ELISpot. It's called an IgX spot, I think is what they call their test. And which was great. I was hoping they would do that because it would be easier for me to send people to get that lab than to have to order the test kits from Germany from Armin Labs that does it. All right. The problem is when IGeneX developed their test, they did some validation studies. All right. So what a validation study is we take our new test and we try to see, can it correctly identify people known to have an illness. All right. So on the IGeneX validation studies, their way of doing an ELISpot, this is their own studies, only found it 30% of the time when it was there. That's not too good of a test to me, okay? So I'm tending not to use the IgX spot out of IGeneX because their validation studies say that it doesn't work that well, actually. I'm tending to do the ELISpot out of Germany. Now, if the ELISpot out of Germany comes back positive, it says, yeah, your immune system is seeing Lyme germs. Does that mean the Lyme germs are fully active? No. And if it comes back, because again, I expect Lyme to live in a person, all right? So the only real way that I determine if somebody has Lyme relapse is to look at what the symptoms tell me. If they have enough symptoms of Lyme, then I treat for Lyme. If they have enough symptoms and they're not doing well of Bartonella, I'm going to treat for Bartonella. So I make my decisions on clinical grounds, okay? All right, so that's how I go about doing it. All right, now, most effective cyst buster for Lyme, clinically, I think it's tinidazole. And that's just based on what I see. Now, other ones that could be, metronidazole might be one, rifampin can be fairly good, grapefruit seed extract can be very good too. But I think clinically, probably tinidazole is the strongest one that I see. All right? All right. Thank you for that question, Oscar, and good luck to you. Hello, Lisa. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Marty. Thanks you so much for helping all those in the Lyme community. You're welcome. We have so many ongoing questions. Yes, you do. That's why we do these webinars. What are your thoughts on Rifing? Are 2 Malarone pills enough to take daily? How do I decrease my viral loads of Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus, and herpes virus type 6? Finally, I take 4 different probiotics. Tell you what, let's deal with these first parts and I'll come to that probiotic last, okay? All right, so what are your thoughts on Rifing? So Rifing, everybody, many people are familiar with it, but a Rife machine is a machine that generates electromagnetic frequencies. And the idea behind a Rife machine is that you can generate a frequency that resonates with the covering of the germ, vibrates it, and kills it, okay? Think of, you probably all have seen pictures of singers sitting in front of a glass of water and singing in a way that breaks the glass, all right? So the vibrations of their vocal sounds vibrate the glass and break it. And that's the general idea about what Rife can do with germs. Okay, now I will tell you that the Food and Drug Administration here in the United States has not approved Rife machines and has been known to actually jail doctors that do them in their practices. So I cannot recommend officially Rife machines, all right? What I can tell you, I share experiences that my patients do when they choose to do these on their own, because I cannot legally recommend Rife because the FDA has taken a negative stance on them. What I see, though, is I think about 40% of patients have improvements when they Rife. There are occasional people that report that they get all the way well. So, for instance, Brian Rosner, who many of you may be familiar with, he runs a publishing house that publishes a lot of resources about Lyme disease. He has written a book about Lyme and Rifing, a lot of that based on his own in-depth experience, and he claims it cured him, okay? I will tell you, I don't see many people get that degree of benefit. In theory, the way Rife works is it could be effective against the spirochete form of Lyme, because the spirochete has a covering that it can vibrate with. And likewise, with the cyst form of Lyme, it might be effective against that. However, it's probably not going to be that effective against intracellular Lyme, Lyme that lives inside of a cell, because inside of a cell, Lyme doesn't have a covering. There's nothing for the Rife machine to vibrate with, okay? So that may be what the limitation is on Rifing, okay? All right. But I think as something that you can add to help with Lyme, it's a possible thing. A good resource about how to Rife would be Brian Rosner's book, okay? So I'd take a look at that. All right. Are 2 Malarone pills enough? Yes. For most people with Babesia, I find that taking 1 Malarone twice a day, the adult strength of Malarone, okay, so there's 2 strengths. The adult strength is 250/100. So Malarone is an anti-malaria medicine that we use to treat Babesia, all right? And it has 2 chemicals in it. One is called tovaquone, that's 250 milligrams, and proquinil, which is 100 milligrams. So whenever you see the strength on this medicine, it's 250/100, all right? Often the way I started is I'll have people do 2 pills twice a day for 3 days to load them up on the medicine. And then once they're good and loaded up on the medicine, then after 3 days, I'll decrease it to 1 pill twice a day. And I find it effective over a 4 to 5 month period of time. All right. So yes, I do. Let's see. How do I decrease my viral loads of Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus, and herpes virus type 6? So the way that I go after viruses is to treat the Lyme germ, all right? So often I don't even do anything about viruses. So those viruses that you just mentioned, Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus, and herpes virus type 6, are common in healthy people. All right, so if we were to pull 100 healthy people off the street and we were to do testing, we would find elevated antibodies against those viruses, all of those, all right? And so what I think happens in Lyme disease is when we detect these viruses, they would be living in the person if they were healthy. There is a chance, though, in Lyme that these viruses might get more active, all right? And then they can become part of the problem. What I like to do, though, is to treat the Lyme infection. I like to get people sleep. I like to lower cytokines. All those things that I advocate in my treatment protocol, I advocate that you do, because they turn your immune system back on, which then could put these viruses back under control. So I usually will not do anything specific to go after the virus other than all of the steps in my Ross Lyme support protocol. I'll show that to you here in a minute. If you follow those steps, probably the immune system is going to start working better. And over the course of a year, it will put those viruses back under control on its own. All right. Now, if we're about a year into treatment, somebody's not doing better, I'm going to start thinking about treating viruses. And my viral protocol is to do olive leaf extract, 500 milligrams, start at 1 pill 3 times a day, and as tolerated, work up to 3 pills 3 times a day. That's your killer, okay? Secondly, I like to boost the immune system to deal with viruses, and I like using mushrooms, a type of mushroom called reishi gano mushrooms. And I like to do a 400 milligram pill 3 times a day. That turns on the white blood cells that fight viral infections, okay? And then finally, I also sometimes will use something called transfer factor, a product called transfer factor plasmic, because it has chemicals in it, transfer factors, which are chemicals made by white blood cells that target the immune system to fight certain infections, okay? So every kind of germ that is in us, like cold viruses, our white blood cells make transfer factors against cold viruses. Our white blood cells make transfer factors against Lyme. Our white blood cells make transfer factors against certain viruses, okay? And transfer factor plasmic has in it transfer factors against various viruses. And so you would take that as 1 pill twice a day, okay? So my antiviral treatment program is about 6 months of olive leaf extract, reishi gano mushrooms, and against and the transfer factors too, okay? So I just want to do a quick screen share here. Hold on here, man. Trying to make sure I've answered your question. Malarone virus. Okay, I know what I want to show you. Okay, so let me go back here, screen share. And earlier this year, I renamed it the Ross Lyme Support Protocol. And I'm going to be going through an update on this probably over the next month, but generally it's current. You're going to see me make some changes in my section on things I recommend for sleep. And I'm going to make some changes on the you'll see. But anyhow, main thing you want to do is get sleep, okay? That lowers cytokines, that helps your immune system work better. Number 2, I advise that people be on a paleo diet. Number 3, lower cytokines, all right? Because that lowering cytokines helps your immune system work better and will help with your symptoms too. Number 4, be on an adaptogen. And as you all know earlier, I mentioned be on ashwagandha. That's my favorite adaptogen. Number 5, fix your hormonal problems. If you've got low adrenals or low thyroid, fix them. Number 6, be on a good multivitamin. Number 7, treat yeast. If you have too many yeast, they kick up cytokines. It suppresses the immune system. And I tell you how to figure out if you have too many yeast here. Number 8, treat your Lyme infection. Number 9, do some basic detox work. 10, treat your co-infections. All right, these are the basic steps, okay? Down here, part 13, I say special consideration 6 months and beyond. And that's when I start thinking, look for treating chronic viruses. Although these days, I'm probably pushing out treating chronic viruses more to about 12 months, okay? So those are the essential things you should do in any Lyme disease treatment, okay? That's the Ross Lyme Support Protocol, all right? All right, let me go back here. All right, let's see. You asked a question. Oh, I meant to show you in the Treat Lyme book, there is a chapter on how to treat a chapter called Infection Treatment Plans. Look in there for my article about how to treat chronic viruses, where I give you all of these details that I just talked about, okay? All right, Lisa, let me see if I can find the second part of your question here. Here we go. Is HMF forte enough to take by itself with history of C. difficile? Good question. So C. difficile, everyone, is a bacteria that lives in the intestines. And when we're on antibiotics, it actually can grow too much. It's one of those rare bacteria that on antibiotics will take off, okay? And if it starts growing too much, it releases a toxin called C. difficile toxin. And that toxin can cause severe watery diarrhea with a lot of bad intestinal cramps, all right? So being on probiotics can help prevent that, like the HMF. But also what's very helpful is to be on a healthy yeast that lives in our intestines, but you can put more in. It's called Saccharomyces boulardii. What a mouthful that is. Saccharomyces boulardii. Thorne carries it as a product called Sacro B. That's easier to say, Sacro B. And you would want to do 2 pills 1 time a day. All right? All right. I usually would do that. If I've got somebody that has C. difficile, I'm putting them on Sacro B. If I have somebody that has had C. difficile before, I'm going to have them on Sacro B as part of a prevention program to keep the C. difficile from getting active again. Okay? All right. Thanks for that question, Lisa. Hello, Valicy. Husband being treated for parasites with ivermectin and artemisia, has passed some worm and fluke-like parasites, but now we are seeing weird branched things that resemble online photos of tertiary stage rope worms. Are these real parasites? I don't think so. So rope worms, when you look at what they are, they're made up probably of mucus lining that gets mucus that gets encased and is found or squeezed by various parts of the intestines into these forms. I don't think that there really are living parasites or real parasites. I think they're more dried up and kind of gelatinous mucus that comes out of your intestines, basically. So I'm not a believer in ropeworm, actually. That's just me. I don't think we have solid proof they actually are real parasites. All right. Thanks, Val, for that question. Hello, Diane. Let's see. If I'm allergic to sulfa drugs, I can't take dapsone. Dapsone is a sulfa drug. Thank you. Yes, that's true. So dapsone is a sulfa drug, unfortunately, and therefore that means you probably cannot, or you can't take it. I would not use dapsone in somebody that has had sulfa allergies before. All right. Thanks for that question, Diane. Hello, Sue. Let's see. Any thoughts on what else might help costochondritis, connective tissue pain, and inflammation that daughter has that her Lyme literate doctor thinks is from Lyme flare-up? She takes glutathione. She gets from you 1.5 grams curcumin from Thorn daily, and constant isotretinoin, heart to back and heat to the back. Okay, so. So a lot of the dosing depends on her size. Okay, so in people that, I'm trying to think. So if she's is 100 pounds or more, you could wind up increasing that curcumin that you take from Thorn, so that she's taking 1,000 milligrams 3 times a day. Okay, and if she is 100 pounds or more, she could be taking 1 teaspoon of the trifortified glutathione twice a day. Also, for this degree of inflammation, the one thing that she might want to add is a prescription medicine called Plaquenil. Plaquenil was originally designed as an anti-malarial medicine. It just doesn't do that good anymore for malaria. But the number one prescribers probably in the country these days are rheumatologists, and that is because it helps decrease inflammation from cytokines and prostaglandin inflammation, which would be the kind of inflammation you see in inflammatory arthritis, for instance. Okay, in Lyme, when we use it, it also sometimes can help intracellular antibiotics like the tetracyclines and Biaxin and Zithromax. It can help them work more powerfully because it changes acid levels in cells. It lowers acid, making them more alkaline, or it gets rid of acid, making the cells more alkaline. And the tetracyclines like doxycycline, minocycline, and also the macrolides like Biaxin and Zithromax can work more strongly that way. In an adult, I would dose a Plaquenil as 200 milligrams twice a day. If your daughter is 100 pounds or more, you could do it as 200 milligrams twice a day. Less than that, I would talk to her prescribing doctor to figure out the right dose. Okay. Now, if you read about Plaquenil, you're going to see some really horrendous things about it causing inflammation in the back of the eyeball. We call that retinitis. That actually happens more in doses in an adult of 400 milligrams twice a day or higher, okay? But not at 200 milligrams twice a day. It seems to be a safe drug in that range, and even the studies say that as well too, okay? Those are some thoughts for you. I hope your daughter does well, Sue. Thank you. Hello, Sue. Also taking Omnicef for flare-up. Was previously on amoxicillin for 2 years, symptom-free for 1.5 years. But okay. I think you're just letting me know that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Hello, Vanessa. Let's see here. I'm treating Lyme for the fourth time. Pick line with Rocephin. My blood work has improved, but symptoms have not. Any thoughts? Well, Vanessa, I guess actually for me to give you the best response, this is a situation where I need to know a lot of what's been tried before, what hasn't been tried before. You might want to take a look at doing one of my online consults where I actually can ask you a lot of questions and give you better information. So let me just quickly show that to you here. Look at this tab called Online Consult. Okay. And so this is my one-to-one medical consult service. Basically, I visit with you online and I ask a lot of questions and then I give you ideas. I tell you what I think is going on based on your responses, so clinically. And then I write a note and I send it to you and I give you my ideas. So read through this whole thing if you're interested in doing this. Okay, there is a consent form you have to take. And basically what the consent form says is that because I haven't examined you, I might that you really should discuss your findings with the doctor, basically, okay? But I can give you some good ideas on what might be or might not be missing. I mean, most of the Lyme is based on the clinical presentation or what the questions and answers tell me, okay? But the big things I would want to know, I can just tell you already, I would be wanting to know if you've relapsed, where did you have any co-infections? Did you have co-infections that might have been missed that are making it harder to get the Lyme out? That would be one thing, okay? Then I would also be entertaining what was used to treat your Lyme. Was it strong enough? Even if it was a PICC line, sometimes there's ways to make that stronger, okay? I would want to know if you had co-infections, were they treated with the right kind of antibiotics? Were they strong enough as well too? All right. So my question would be what was missing? All right. And then finally, if it looks like from your answers that everything was handled adequately, I would be looking at doing one of my persister regimens. So I posted an article, I think it was yesterday, about persister Lyme, and I would have you take a look at that. It's basically approaches to take when Lyme will not get better, and it deals with the idea of persisters. And what persisters are is we think that when Lyme is, or there's research showing that when Lyme is exposed to antibiotics, that it has an ability to slow its metabolism way, way, way down and go into hibernation. And you can have spirochete persisters, which is the corkscrew-looking form of Lyme. You can have cyst persisters, and also in a persister form, Lyme moves more into colonies or biofilm communities, okay? All right, so we know all that can happen. And so there's various ways that you can approach that. And even if you're on IV antibiotics, that you can approach that. And so I take a look at my article on persisters. In fact, I'm going to show it to you right now. So let's see here. Take a look under the chapter called Infection Treatment Plan. And there's really two articles I've recently written and that I just published in the last few days. One is how to treat persister Lyme, what works, okay? And I mentioned about 3 different ways. And I also have a full article on one of those ways, which is to use a drug called dapsone. But take a look at both of these articles. Probably the better one to start with would be how to treat persister Lyme, okay? All right. Let me go back here. Is take a look at that article. It's a fairly good article with good useful information for you. You can even share with your physician as well too. Okay? All right. Hello, Pamela C. Have you any experience knowledge about the copper Lyme treatment mito activator? Supposedly it wipes out spirochetes in months rather than years. I would be there is nothing that wipes Lyme out quickly that I'm aware of, okay? And part of the problem is with this illness is people want to get better more quickly, but this product has not had any research that would support that in any substantial way. So I would say you probably got some false claims here. Sorry about that. All right. Hello, Michelle. Let's see, I have severe head pressure and tightness in my brain. What is this from, and can anything help? So often head pressure can be part of Bartonella. I've seen it also be part of Lyme. So first of all, figure out what your infections are, okay? If you want to know how to do that, take a look at my chapter called How to Diagnose in the Treat Lyme book, where I talk about how do you diagnose Lyme and how do you diagnose Bartonella or even Babesia, all right? So make sure you're treating your related infection. But the head pressure often is a symptom that I'll see with Bartonella, okay? In terms of helping it, one thing would be make sure you're treating the right infections, okay? So Lyme or Bartonella, do your treatments for those. Secondly, magnesium often can help, all right? So you want to be taking magnesium. I like doing a mix of magnesium citrate and magnesium malate. I use a Thorne product called magnesium citramate that has both of those in it. But if you can do magnesium somewhere around 400, 600 milligrams before bedtime, magnesium usually will help decrease the intensity of headaches, okay? You want to take that at bedtime because it may make you sleepy at that dose. And your only real limiting factor with magnesium is as you take more and more of it, it sometimes can tend to cause diarrhea to develop, okay? All right. So, but magnesium, I would do that daily. Secondly, I would be on a good, make sure you're using anti-inflammatories that are good for cytokines, like the curcumin, Thorne Mariva 500 that I've mentioned a number of times tonight. And you might try dosing it at 1,000 milligrams 3 times a day. Okay. Those would be a couple of things that you might think about doing. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Michelle. Okay. Let's see here. Hi, B. Let's see. Was on rifampin, Bactrim, and clindamycin, and now on cholestyramine QID, which is 4 times a day, and fluconazole 100 milligrams per day for a month. Is this a detoxing regimen? Have you used it? Ideas. I am now supposed to get a mold detection kit for my environment. I did test positive for exposure to mold. How does one know if the exposure is recent or sometime in the past? I have moved several times and am not positive about the location of the exposure. Thanks for all you do. Okay. So in terms of trying to figure out if your mold exposure is current or the past, the only thing you really can do is to look and see, are you currently being exposed? Okay. The problem is, I mentioned earlier tonight, and you may want to read the article that I showed earlier about mold toxin illness and Lyme disease. It's in the Treat Lyme book. All right. Mold toxin illness and Lyme disease. Read that whole article. Okay. But a few points about that, about mold exposures, is because the issue with mold toxicity is that 25% of us, when we breathe them in or drink them in, can't get rid of them. It means we could have acquired it any time in our life, any time that we've been in buildings that have mold. Okay. So that could be your current home. That could be your current work environment. So the 2 places you probably spend the most time currently are your home and your work environment if you work. Okay. So generally, the only thing you can influence now is where you work now. So I suggest people get testing of their home and work environments. Okay. But you can't, there's no way of knowing if they come up clean, then probably that means you had these from previous exposures. If they don't come up clean, though, it means, yeah, you've got exposures now, but it also may mean you had some in the past. You just have no real way of knowing. Okay. All right. Now, is this a decent detox regimen? Yeah. I mean, cholestyramine 4 times a day can be, it's a little of an intense regimen. You might be able to get by with doing 3 times a day and be able to have a little more time in your life to structure your life, because taking cholestyramine is hard to take 4 times a day in terms of timing issues. Okay. But yeah, this seems like a reasonable idea of a way to get rid of mold toxins. I mentioned some other supplements you can take to do that, though, in that article called Mold Toxin Illness. Okay. All right. And I just showed that to you here a minute ago. All right. Thanks for that question, B. Good luck to you. Hello, Jenny. Let's see. My daughter is in severe pain and it's getting to be 24/7. She was diagnosed December of 2016, just 2 weeks ago. Her labs came back from 2 different lab. Results were high for active Lyme, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and Babesia. She needs to be admitted to the hospital to do antibiotics to be able to handle HERCs. How do we get this done? So I am very doubtful you're going to get somebody to do an admission to the hospital. Generally, the insurance is not going to cover for something like that. Unfortunately, there aren't places that usually you can go to start your Lyme treatment. They just don't exist. The big thing that I would do is make sure you're doing everything you can to lower those cytokines, which become elevated in the HERCs, and that is to be on glutathione. I would do the Trifortify 5 milliliters twice. Well, in an adult, and I don't know your daughter's size, unfortunately. In an adult, I would do 5 milliliters twice a day. I would do the curcumin 1,000 milligrams 3 times a day. And when you start your antibiotics, I would go very low and slow to prevent getting into a bad HERC situation. Unfortunately, the healthcare system is not designed to handle people with Lyme, unfortunately. And if you do things to block the cytokines and go very low and slow with your antibiotics, often people can't tolerate that in their homes. But you're in an unfortunate situation. Sorry about that. Hello, Vanessa. Let's see. Hello, Dr. Ross. Greetings from Massachusetts. Greetings back. I think you guys had a nor'easter today, or at least one of my patients in New Hampshire did. I suspect you guys did too. So hope you're not climbing out from too much snow there right now. Let's see. I have relapsed with Lyme for the 4th time, most recently after a car accident, followed by a spine epidural, followed by a cavity filled. I now have a PICC line with Rocephin. 4 months in my blood work has improved, but I'm still very symptomatic. Vanessa, unfortunately, there is not a second part to your question here. If you wrote something more to me, it's not here, so I'm not sure how to respond to this, okay? If you do need more of my help directly, feel free to do one of those online consults, okay? All right. Sorry about that. Hello, Jeannie. Let's see, off subject. I haven't been tested for Lyme yet. You have said you'd like the immunoblot. Is that available yet? And would it catch Lyme in person who has had it for a year? Yes. So in terms of testing, there's a whole article I have about testing and what is the best testing, okay? I'll show that to you here in a minute. But in terms of the test that is the most sensitive, okay, so there's a medical term called sensitivity, which is what is the ability of a test to find the infection if it's in you, okay? The test that is most sensitive based on validation studies, those are studies where the company that has done the test has gone out and found cases of people that have the infection and tried to see how good is their test at finding it? How sensitive is their test, okay? The immunoblot by IGeneX is now available, and their validation studies show that it will find Lyme, if present, 91% of the time. Okay? I think that is the most valid test out there right now. The only other test that has better validation studies is the Lyme disease blood culture test by a laboratory called Advanced Laboratory Services. And on their validation studies, which was a study of 40 people, they found Lyme when they're 95% of the time. However, I'm doubtful that is accurate because Lyme is really hard to detect in the blood. Lyme doesn't live in the blood. Lyme or easily live in the blood. Lyme likes to live in tissues that don't have good blood flow. And so if you're trying to grow Lyme that you pull out of the blood, the chances of finding it are quite small. So I know their study said 95%, but it was a small study of 40 some odd people. I'm doubtful that in the real world that they have that kind of sensitivity. So I still would put my money on the immunoblot. And yes, it is currently available. Western blot from IGeneX will find it. It's about 80% sensitive. The ELISpot test through Armin Labs is about 85% sensitive, so still not as good as that immunoblot, okay? So I still think today the best test is this new IGeneX immunoblot with 91% sensitivity, all right? So if you want to read more about Lyme testing and all options that you have, and a review of the Lyme infection tests, where I review most Lyme tests that are out there. I just updated this on January 7th, 2018. So it includes the information about the new testing through IGeneX for Lyme, okay? Some useful information. Hello, Michelle. Let's see. How would I know if I have mold toxicity, and how would I treat if I do? All right. So there's two different ways that doctors tend to look for mold toxicity. And I will call it, one is the older way and one is the more current way, although a lot of doctors still do the older way. All right. So the older way is based on the work of Dr. Richie Shoemaker. And Dr. Richie Shoemaker has developed a genetic profile test called an HLA-DR test that looks to see, do you have a genetic pattern in your blood that suggests you are a person that cannot remove mold toxins, all right? And so what it does, it looks to say, do you have a genetic predisposition to not being able to remove mold toxins? And based on his testing, if you do have that genetic predisposition, then that, and you have a lot of symptoms of fatigue and body pain, symptoms that look like mold, for instance, and Lyme, they look pretty identical, then you would wind up trying to do mold removal based on that genetic testing, that genetic profile, all right? However, it's a genetic predisposition. It doesn't really prove you have too many mold toxins in you. So the way that I'm doing it more and more these days is to actually not do the genetic profile test, but rather to actually test you to see, do you have too many mold toxins in you? And there's two labs that you can use to do that. One is a lab called Real-Time Lab out of Texas, and they have a profile that looks to see if you have mold from 4 different families, all right? They'll look for ochratoxin, aflatoxin, trichocethine, which is black mold toxin, and something called cleotoxin. The difficulty with their test, however, is that it is a $795 test. It's expensive, but I think it's an accurate test, okay? And the good part about it is as you're removing your mold toxins, then you can go back and retest and see how you're getting better. And on retest, their test is, I think, about $150. It's a lot less than it is when you do it for the first time, okay? The other lab system that's doing it, and I don't know their pricing because I don't use them, is a lab called Great Plains. I think they're called Great Plains. They do a mold test also like Real-Time does, all right? And they look for a few other mold toxins in their test as well too. Anyhow, those are the two main labs that do it. And that more and more is how I'm doing it. Now, Shoemaker also, in addition, if you go look at his site, it's called Surviving Mold. In addition, he'll have you do a visual test where you're looking to see, it's called a visual contrast study, where you look to see, can you distinguish between black, grays, and whites? You can actually do it on the computer. And if you fail in your ability to adequately distinguish those different shades of black, white, and gray, then that is something we see in people that have mold toxicities. But I will tell you, it isn't always accurate. And so I think the most accurate way to tell if you have mold toxicity illness is to test for it, okay? When do I start thinking about doing it? If I've got somebody that has a strong clinical history that they have had mold exposures, like I was healthy till I moved into this one house and the house had black mold on the walls and I got sick, I'm going to start by thinking mold toxicity is a big problem, all right? The other way, though, is if I've got somebody I'm treating for Lyme and we're about 9 months into treatment, they're not getting better, I'm going to start wondering about mold toxicity being there, okay? Mold toxicity illness can look just like Lyme, okay? Now, one thing I'll also give you a caveat on here is if you are a person that tests positive for Lyme and you have a strong history for mold toxin illness, it is possible your whole problem is mold toxins and not Lyme. All right. So just testing positive for Lyme does not mean the germ is active in you, causing the problems you have. Okay. So keep that in mind. So there are people that I treat that if I get a strong history that they got sick when they lived in that house full of mold, and they test positive for Lyme, sometimes I'll do is I'll just treat them for mold toxin illness and they get 100% better. And I never need to do anything to address the Lyme. Now, why wouldn't I do anything to address Lyme? Well, if you heard me earlier tonight, I said, I don't think in somebody that has had Lyme in them for a year or more that we ever get rid of the infection. The best that we are doing with antibiotics, and the reason to use either herbal or prescription antibiotics in Lyme, is to knock the germ down. Not to eradicate it, because I don't think we eradicate it. I think we get it down to a degree the immune system can control it, okay? So if I remove mold toxins in somebody that tests positive for Lyme and their health gets back to 100%, there is no reason to use antibiotics to go after that Lyme. Their immune system is already working well enough to either have gotten rid of that germ or to keep it under control, okay? All right. Thanks for that question, Michelle. Hello, Misty. Let's see, I have a question regarding post-Lyme syndrome and scleroderma. Have you any knowledge of this particular sequence of events? Lyme diagnosed in 2010, doxy times 12 weeks times 2 courses. Lyme resolved followed by systemic sclerosis diagnosis in 2013 with severe pulmonary hypertension. Thoughts? So, unfortunately, in some people with Lyme can trigger autoimmune illness, all right? And that is that the immune system gets triggered by Lyme to start attacking the tissues. That could be what happened here with you. But I would also want to make sure that you still don't have active Lyme, still triggering more of this inflammatory process as well, too. One thing you might want to do, I did say earlier tonight, Misty, that we don't have a perfect test to know if Lyme is gone. But if you have a lot of symptoms of Lyme, you may still want to be treating the Lyme. That's one thought, all right? The other thing is you could do that ELISpot test that I mentioned earlier that does give you an idea. If it is come back positive, it does mean you have active Lyme, that your immune system is still treating Lyme, okay? All right. Now, the other thing to look at is using something called low-dose naltrexone. Naltrexone is a narcotic blocker that at low doses can decrease autoimmune attacking, your immune system attacking you, all right? And so I'm not going to take the time to go through it now because we're kind of winding down here, but there's a whole article I have about low-dose naltrexone, and I would find it in my immune system chapter. And let's see here. You can either look at this article called When Your Immune System Causes Lyme, or this one on low-dose naltrexone on Lyme doesn't help. What I write here is valid for your scleroderma condition as well too, but I would consider doing at least a 3-month trial of the naltrexone. And I write about it there. There's enough information in this article you could show it to your practitioners and see if they'll prescribe it for you too, okay? And I talk about how to prescribe it in here as well too. But naltrexone is a great way that you can work with to turn down your immune system attacking you, okay? All right. Let's see here. Let's see. Hi, McKay. Thank you for doing that. You're welcome. Do you know of a support group where people with Lyme can speak to others suffering? With the frustration of dealing with this, it seems like something has to change. Who can make the changes needed in Congress? CDC, HHS, in Oregon, every MD or DO is unwilling to treat Lyme. McKay, it's a really bad situation in Oregon. I actually have testified before the Oregon legislature about this situation and was actually attacked by the legislators. It's a very hostile environment down there. Part of the problem in Oregon is that one of the original authors of the Infectious Disease Society of America guidelines advises the medical boards on infectious disease problem, and he is staunch adamantly against doing anything to treat Lyme beyond that initial month of antibiotics. And he advises the board to remove licenses of doctors that treat Lyme down there. So it's a really hard area right now. Thankfully, in Oregon, the naturopaths have taken up the ball and generally do a good job treating Lyme down there. But you're in a bad situation. In Oregon, there's a network called the Oregon Lyme Disease Network. You might want to make some contact with them. You could Google them. There's also nationally, there's a group called the American Lyme Disease Association. There's also out of California, there's a group called LymeDisease.org that has local chapters. You might want to start by making some Googling those resources and seeing what information you can learn from them. Okay? All right. So everyone, that's it for me for tonight. I'm kind of tiring out after a long day here managing people with Lyme and then doing this webinar. It's been great to be here, though. So again, for those of you that are still here, tomorrow morning, watch in your email inbox, because there will be an email from me saying that the recording's ready, all right? And after the webinar tonight, I get to go home and do a few edits on that to get it ready to be posted tomorrow. And then I got to get it posted on all the various places that I post it. So you can find it again on the Facebook page at facebook.com/treatlyme. You could find it at my supplement store, Marty Ross MD Supplements, on the bottom of the homepage. You can find that video recording at treatlyme.net, which is the Treat Lyme book, or you can find it on my YouTube channel. All right, it'll be ready somewhere between 6 and 6:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. Also, in that email, you'll be able to sign up for the next 2 webinars. I have one next week and the week after. In a second here, I'm going to redirect you over to the Treat Lyme book. You're going to be taken to the subscription page to subscribe to the Treat Lyme book. I wish you would subscribe. If you do, you can read all that great information I have there. As you can see, that information that I describe here is all written down for you too. You don't have to wait to see me in webinars to get the information you need to get well. I probably have written an article about it, okay? So get access to the Treat Lyme book. I'm going to take you to the subscription page so you can do that. And I appreciate when you subscribe, because that supports these webinars and the writing of that book too, all right? Good night, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.